the shield of the Americas, and the role of the people. Hello, this is The Thinker speaking. On March 7th, 2026, in Miami, Florida, a meeting was held between several leaders of the Americas to establish an initiative known as the Shield of the Americas. This project proposes to coordinate political and strategic actions among different countries in the hemisphere. Because this is a topic of great importance for the future of the peoples of the Americas, we recently published an analysis on this channel titled The Shield of the Americas: Geopolitics, History, and the Destiny of the Continent. In that first video, we examined the topic from a historical and geopolitical perspective. Today, we are publishing a second part of that reflection. Because beyond the strategic alliances between governments, there is an even deeper question. What role should the peoples of the Americas themselves play in this new historical moment? And it is precisely this question that we will reflect on today. On this channel, we try to observe major historical processes with a calm, reflective, and fanatical perspective. Because often, people find themselves immersed in events without having the necessary time to stop and think about what is really happening. Thinking is a way of understanding, and understanding is the first step toward building a better future. Lately, some analysts have begun to discuss the possibility of a so-called Shield of the Americas. This idea suggests that the American continent could consolidate itself as a region with greater political and strategic stability amidst a world undergoing profound transformations. But when concepts of this nature appear, it is necessary to analyze them calmly, because geopolitics never arises in a vacuum. It is always the result of historical processes that unfold over long periods. To understand the current moment in the American continent, it is necessary to first recall an important stage in its recent history. During the 1960s and 1970s, Latin America was profoundly influenced by the logic of the Cold War. The world was divided into two major ideological blocs. In this context, the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959 had an enormous impact on the continent's politics. For the first time, a revolutionary regime inspired by socialism was established in the Western Hemisphere, and it did so not through a free electoral process, but through an armed revolution. This fact is important to understand clearly, because when we talk about democracy, we must start from a basic principle. Only free elections, held through popular vote and guaranteed by constitutional institutions, can be considered democratic processes. Changes of power obtained through coups d'etat are not democratic, but neither are changes of power obtained through armed revolutions. In both cases, power does not arise from the free decision of the citizens. It arises from the imposition of force upon society. Therefore, from a broader historical perspective, both coups d'etat and armed revolutions can be interpreted as forms of tutelary power change. In both cases, society does not decide. Society is led. During the decades of the Cold War, these types of processes multiplied in different parts of the world, and Latin America was no exception. In that historical context, the United States assumed a role of strong influence in the strategic affairs of the hemisphere. For several decades, a kind of political shield was established under its leadership, aimed at containing the expansion of revolutionary movements inspired by the Cuban model. It could be said that during that period, a form of geopolitical tutelage existed that decisively influenced the political orientation of the continent. But the world today is very different from that of that era. The bipolar confrontation of the Cold War disappeared more than 30 years ago. The international system has become far more complex. New powers have emerged. economic and technological relations have profoundly transformed the global landscape. And amidst these transformations, the American continent could find itself facing a distinct historical circumstance. That is why some analysts are beginning to speak again of the idea of a shield of the Americas. But then an important question arises. Is this simply a change of guardian, or could it represent a different opportunity for the peoples of the continent themselves? History rarely moves in a straight line. Often it swings like a pendulum. During certain periods, it seems to remain stable for decades, but at other times it begins to move rapidly, producing profound transformations in the world's equilibrium. Understanding these movements is one of the most difficult tasks of historical reflection, because people often live within the flow of events without fully perceiving the epochal shift they are experiencing. Only with the passage of time is it possible to recognize that a new historical cycle has begun. Today, many signs suggest that the world may be entering one of these transitional phases. New international balances are beginning to form. Relationships between the great powers are being redefined. Global economic structures are being transformed. And amidst this swing of the historical pendulum, the American continent may find itself facing a unique opportunity. But historical opportunities are not seized automatically. They require awareness. They require political maturity. They require that people understand the moment they are living in. We could say that history is like a train that travels through the stations of time. When that train passes by a society, that society must be ready to board. If it isn't, the train continues on its way, and the opportunity is lost. The natural resources of the Americas. The American continent possesses one of the highest concentrations of natural resources on the planet. Large reserves of fresh water, extensive fertile lands, enormous energy resources, strategic minerals fundamental to new technologies, and a biodiversity unique in the world. These geographical characteristics are not insignificant. Throughout history, geography has been one of the most decisive factors in the formation of civilizations. Peoples who manage their natural resources intelligently can build prosperous and stable societies. But when these resources become the object of dispute or mismanagement, they can also become a source of conflict. Therefore, the future of the American continent will not depend solely on its natural wealth. It will depend above all on the institutional maturity with which its societies manage that wealth. The democratic aspiration of the peoples. If we examine the political history of the American continent, we find an interesting phenomenon. Despite the enormous cultural, social, and economic differences between its countries, there is an ideal that runs through a large part of its societies. The aspiration for political systems where citizens can participate in the election of their leaders. Even in those countries where authoritarian systems have existed, the word democracy continues to be used. This reveals something profound. The societies of the American continent have developed a strong expectation of political freedom, and this aspiration is part of the continent's cultural heritage. But there is a principle that runs through all of its political history. Systems are ultimately evaluated by their results, because of the living conditions they create, because of the freedoms they allow, because of the opportunities they offer their citizens. In that sense, as the thinker often states, from a Stoic perspective, perhaps the most reasonable thing to do is something very simple. Let each political system showcase its results, and let the people themselves observe those results and draw their own conclusions. Because at the end of the day, it is societies that live with the consequences of the systems that govern them. And there is a truth that no ideology has been able to erase. There is no vaccine against ambition or against human corruption. That is a permanent reality of the human condition. That is why societies need to build defenses, institutional defenses, civic defenses, moral defenses. Perhaps that is the true, profound meaning of any political shield. Not simply a geopolitical structure, rather a set of mechanisms capable of protecting the freedom of peoples from the excesses of power. Today, the Americas may find themselves facing a new historical opportunity, an opportunity to strengthen their institutions, to broaden the participation of their societies, and for the peoples of the continent to begin assuming a more conscious role in shaping their own destiny. Because when people understand the historical moment they are living through, they can begin to take the lead in writing their own destiny. I am Carlos Alberto, the thinker. If you find these reflections useful, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and participate with your comments. Thinking together is also a way of building the future.